Hello and welcome back. This is a little bit of a follow-up from my previous video where I did a up-to-date comparison of Adobe's Denoise versus Topaz, and a couple of people have said maybe I didn't give Adobe a fair crack of the whip. So what I'm going to do in this video is just do a very brief comparison using the DNG feature in Lightroom and comparing it with exporting it to Photo AI and returning it as a DNG into Lightroom. And this is really for those people who don't use Photoshop and just want to continue using Lightroom, and so we'll have a look at the comparison of the two. So if you're not sure about the rest of the details, please look at my previous video, but in this one we'll just do a straight comparison, apples and apples, between Photo AI and Adobe's Denoise and Sharpening, all within Lightroom. So let's dive in. So in this video we're going to use the same example that I used in my previous example, which was a photo that's got some real issues with it. It's a photo taken in very poor light with high ISO and long focal length, so all of those things working against it. So it'll be a good comparison. But I've also got a couple of examples that were taken in much better conditions, and we'll have a look and see if using the Denoise feature can really help photographs that are already not too bad, but certainly this is the one that we used in the previous example. And what we have here is it's a fairly well cropped in image of this this owl. You can see here it was taken in an enclosure, and it's really for the comparison purposes only. So I have done some general exposure adjustments to it, and you'll see if we come down to the detail tab, I have applied some sharpening here. And what I will do is I will go back and reset that, and we will start from scratch so that we've got an apples and apples comparison with this one. So no sharpening, and to go in and use Adobe's Denoise feature, we will just obviously click on the Denoise button and it will come up with a preview. Now the problem is with the preview is you don't really get much of an idea of what's going to happen, and this pops up on my other screen, so let's just drag this over. You get this sort of a view. It's vaguely some part of the bird. If I click on that, you can see, yeah, well, there's the noise and there's the result without the noise, and of course all you get is this slider. It doesn't really give you much more of an option. So to try and just keep it as a fair comparison, I'm just going to leave it at the default setting, and we'll click on enhance, and it will go away and it will produce a DNG. Now it takes, I don't know, about 30 seconds to come up with a DNG, and now I've done this previously, so I'll just be repeating it, but we'll go through the steps just so that everyone's clear on what happens with it. It does take just a little bit of time, and then we come back with this one, which is the DNG, and it's version 2 because I already created one previously. So having done the DNG version with the Denoise, you can see that it's certainly removed a lot of the noise, but there's very little enhancement of detail. So what we will then do is go in and let's apply some sharpening. Now typically something like about an amount of 60. I'm not going to go overboard. I'd leave the radius at 1, but let's try and get as much detail as we can out of it. Let's go to about 90%, and of course we want to mask that. We don't want to try and sharpen the background, we just really want to sharpen the edges. So this is typically what you would do in Lightroom, and here's your result. Let's just see if we can turn that off and on. You're only going to see the difference in the sharpening, which is quite honestly almost imperceptible. Okay, so that's the Lightroom version. So just to follow on from what I did in Lightroom using Denoise, I did another version and pushed the Denoise up to the maximum of 100, and I've gone in and I've actually maxed out the sharpening. So how does that compare with what the previous version would have done with just the straight comparison? Let's just look at those two. We need to go back to look at the comparison. And let's just do that side by side. This on the left is just the standard version I did, and on the right is the one where I maxed out the Denoise. You can see there's still very little detail. It's starting to get some artifacts creeping in. So even pushing Lightroom's Denoise and sharpening to the max, it's not really going to compare with Topaz. How do we do this using Photo AI without going to Photoshop? Well, we simply go back to, and I've got so many different versions here. Here's our original raw file. Let's just be fair and look at that comparison before we go into that. Here are the two, the Denoise version. Let's go back to the library and do a side-by-side comparison, because the comparison is pretty interesting. This is the original, no noise reduction, no sharpening, and this is Adobe's attempt at noise reduction, which it certainly has done, and sharpening, which hasn't really done anything much. Okay, so let's now go back to our original version again. Just have to find, we've lost our mouse. So back to the original NEF version, go to develop, and to access the Topaz Photo AI, you need to go to the File menu, plug in Extras, and you'll see here Process with Topaz Photo AI. So we'll just dive straight into Photo AI, and it will give us then the comparison. So here we have the raw file open up in Topaz Photo AI, and it has applied automatically its raw denoise, and you'll see here that I've allowed it to select automatically what it uses, and it's just using the normal setting, and you have a strength slider. But because you get a better preview, you've got more of an option to decide whether you need to increase that strength or not. On the right hand side you can see here's the denoise after the filter is applied, and this is the before. So it gives us a pretty good idea. And then of course we can go in and apply the sharpening, and if we want to we can just paint on the sharpening onto the area we want, and then we just simply export back into Lightroom Classic, and it will return as a DNG. Now unfortunately I can't change any of these settings here because it crashes my video recording software, but this is as simple as it gets, and the processing time is about the same as for Lightroom's denoise option. So let's jump back into Lightroom now and have a look at the result. So now that's returned to Lightroom as a DNG file from Photo AI. We've applied the denoising and the sharpening from within Photo AI. So we can now do a apples and apples comparison with the version that we did in Lightroom using Lightroom's denoise. So that's our Photo AI version, and we just need to find the right version that we did, and here it is. So if I select those two and we do a side-by-side comparison, let's just see what the difference is. Now, for some strange reason with my cropping, even though the cropping was the same, the two versions have come back with a slightly different setup, but you can see here on the left is the one where I've done Photo AI, and on the right is the Adobe version, and it's a bit of a no-brainer. The Photo AI version is light years ahead of the Adobe version in every way possible. There is more detail. Yes, there might be a little bit more noise there, but we could go in and tweak that and adjust that a little bit. I've just used the default settings, and quite clearly Lightroom and Adobe's version of denoise and sharpening really doesn't do a good enough job. So that's an apples and apples comparison. We can see the two different versions here, and I've applied a little more lightening to this one, but of course being a DNG we can still modify the file using all of our typical tools on the raw file. So that's a fairly good apples and apples comparison. I think it pretty much speaks for itself. There's not really a fair comparison there between Adobe and Topaz. Topaz is light years ahead. But let's look at a couple of other images where there's minimal noise and see whether it really makes a difference. Okay, for this second example, I'm taking a photo that was taken in Edinburgh early this year, taken looking over the rooftops of the city. It was shot at 400 ISO, so slightly higher ISO than standard, 200mm focal length f9, and I'm interested in the details here on the roofs here with all the chimneys and all of the details here. So this is the raw file, the NEF file, and you'll see no sharpening, no denoise applied. So what I did secondly was I went through into the Lightroom version and allowed it to do its denoise and applied the sharpening to it. So you can see there, if we just go back and we'll do the comparison in the library, that's the Lightroom denoise version, and then we have the original file. Let's do that side-by-side comparison, and you can see here the noise reduction version certainly has cleaned up the image quite a bit. There's a little bit of noise in there, but quite honestly it's not too bad. But certainly applying some denoise and sharpening to the image file does help clean it up, even at 400 ISO, which is really not too bad. It's not too bad. But I've done the same thing using the Photo AI version, so let's just go back to the single view and let's choose the Photo AI versus the original raw file, which is this one, and let's do the same side-by-side comparison. On the left we have the Photo AI version, and on the right is the original, and you'll see there's a little bit better resolution of fine detail in the Topaz version. These little chimney pots are just that little bit better defined, and this is using Topaz's sharpening as well, obviously. And so when we're doing a comparison here, we're getting that slightly better resolution. So let's just compare the Photo AI version with the Lightroom in noise reduction one. Let's just go back to single view and let's just choose the Lightroom version plus the Photo AI. That's our real comparison test. So here we go again. On the left hand side is the Photo AI version. Let's come back down and look at those chimney pots, and on the right is the Lightroom enhanced one, and you'll see that again there's quite a big difference between Topaz and Lightroom, both in the denoise and the sharpening. There is just that much more detail brought out by the Topaz version. Let's look at a few more details. Yes, it's brought out a little bit more detail in these smaller details, and across the board it's definitely done a better job. Now the difference between no denoise on the original file and using the denoise feature in either Lightroom or Photo AI, it's not a massive difference, but again, if you're looking for bringing out as much detail as you can out of the photograph, applying some denoise from the Topaz Photo AI is going to give you a better result overall. So let's now look at an example taken at base or virtually base ISO and see if there's any difference there. And so for our final example, this one was shot at 80 ISO, which is virtually base ISO on this camera. No sharpening applied, no denoise. This is the raw file. It's pretty good, you know. There's not really much noise noticeable. But again, what happens if we do denoise using Lightroom and Photo AI? So let's just find the Lightroom one and compare it with the original, and let's look at that side-by-side comparison. And on the left you've got the Lightroom enhanced one, and the right is the original. You can see there's virtually no noise, even in the sky, which would typically have the most noise in it. There's not a lot there to start with. You probably wouldn't really worry too much about that. But has it brought out any more detail? Well, yes, in the Lightroom enhanced version with the sharpening applied, there's a little bit more detail, not a massive amount. So let's now go back and compare with the Photo AI versus the Lightroom enhanced. We know that there's not a massive difference between the two, and let's go in and do that comparison. And once that builds up the preview, we'll be able to see the apples and apples comparison. So you can see here that the Photo AI has probably applied a little bit too much sharpening here. Let's go back and look at that sky. You can see here that there's virtually no difference. There's not much noise in the sky, but there is marginally more detail in some of these other areas. It might be the fact that the Topaz sharpening is a little bit more aggressive, but in a comparison like this, there's virtually no difference. You probably don't really need to apply any denoise into an image shot at pretty much base ISO. So there's the side-by-side comparison, a fair comparison as far as I can make it between Lightroom's denoise and sharpening and Photo AI. And of course I know there are other denoise programs on the market, but this is probably the one that I think is got the best reputation as of this moment. And so it's obvious that with base images shot at low or base ISO, virtually no difference to be had. But as you start to increase those ISO settings all the way up to those super high settings, the difference between Photo AI and Adobe's version is just night and day. So for all of those people that were concerned that I wasn't doing a fair comparison, that's about as fair a comparison as I can make it, and I think the results are pretty clear. So thanks for watching, and I'll speak to you again soon.